Welcome to the PR in Lockdown podcast, your guide to PR and communications in a post-lockdown world, in collaboration with the PRCA. I'm Rob Double, Director of Access Studios, and in this episode, I'm talking to Vanessa Pine, co-founder and director of Atlas Partners. We discuss the realities of managing lockdown from their hub in London and the challenge of transitioning into this new normal. Vanessa, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Morning, Rob. It's nice to be here. I've got my cup of tea ready, so...
And we've discussed this already, how jealous I am of your cup of tea. I always get tea jealousy whenever I see someone on a virtual call having a cup of tea and I don't have one. Right, let's talk right at the beginning about just what is Atlas Partners. What are you guys about, and what do you guys mainly do in terms of services?
So we're a small integrated kind of comms advisory firm. We help clients with their corporate reputation and with their political engagement. And in December last year, we were awarded PRCA's Public Affairs Board Consultancy of the Year, which was really exciting.
Excellent. And in terms of the team, how big is your team? And you're based predominantly in London, or at least you were when everyone was in the office based in London.
Yeah, so I'm speaking to you from not so sunny Kennington right now. Our offices are at Oxford Circus, but we've only been there a few times in the last few months. And we have a team of 12 spread across various parts of the London and the region.
Let's talk about then the beginning of lockdown. So the 12 of you in the team, and obviously you as the director and co-founder. What was the experience like in that first month, that first couple of months where things really suddenly went into lockdown?
I mean, I think as it was for everyone, it was a really strange time. And I'd actually just got back from holiday in Australia. So I went straight from a plane into lockdown because I felt that I should be self-isolating. Transition-wise, it was relatively easy because everybody works on laptops already and our systems are all in the cloud. But I definitely think the emotional side of that was much more disruptive. And I suppose I quite wanted to give us a sense of meaning and control in that situation where we basically had little of either. So we started in the first few weeks doing a bit of a kind of working from home survey and asking the team to reflect on what aspects of their job were easier or what aspects of their job were harder and how their jobs and their interactions were changing. And that was really interesting.
Just out of interest, what were the key things that surprised you that were interesting within those findings?
I think like the first thing, which I was slightly surprised by, was that actually just aggregating the responses and playing those back helped the team to feel less alone. Because I think we talk a lot at Atlas about we're a small team anyway, so we think a lot about being in it together. And I think we tried really hard to be open about the fact that it wasn't okay and that it was normal even to be finding aspects of it hard. Interestingly, though, 2/3 of the team felt that they were being more productive at home. And I think that was something to do with fewer distractions and perhaps more time to read and think. And despite those challenges of homeschooling and loneliness and small flats and loud family or flatmates, there were some really important actual personal benefits around doing more exercise or eating well instead of commuting. I think that the change in the commuting time particularly was quite interesting and impacted everybody personally quite strongly. Our mission at Atlas, like our kind of mission statement as an agency, is to be the happiest agency, not to be the biggest or the most successful. And that's, because we believe that happy people are more creative and more productive. So we've always had quite a strong focus on staff satisfaction and engagement. And I think that the survey and the questions and the conversations it promoted helped give the team a sense of kind of unity and control over really difficult times. But it also reiterated that the things that give the team purpose are opportunities to learn, to try new things, to own things, and their strong internal relationships. So it allowed us to then focus on those key challenges in terms of adaptation over the time.
That is really interesting that, the points you're making there about how the virtual working environment actually really, people saw a lot of positives in it, because I heard a lot, particularly on this podcast, about the challenges that virtual working has placed, particularly on fostering a work culture. Some people overworking and people feeling, in that very isolated environment or difficult environments. If people are in small, flat share arrangements, and obviously are not being able to move around as freely. Interestingly, that your team, there was actually a lot of people found there are benefits to being at home, and I assume that's something that you're going to take forwards now as a result.
It is. I mean, it's not a universal experience, and I think obviously, there are elements of the transition that weren't simple from a personal perspective, but also from the point that you're making about collaboration and creativity and the accessibility for quick questions and quick approvals, all of which are way easier when you're in the office together. And I think we reflected on the lack of informal social cues and body language and how important those are for both internal and client relationships. But yeah, I think I was pleasantly surprised that, and it's partly a function of, I guess, our privilege that we have a job that's relatively easy to do and that the transition was relatively easy and that it wasn't beyond the wit of our creativity to come up with new ways of compensating for those things that we were missing.
What was the impact of lockdown, that immediate period, on the company? Obviously, you have a client base. How was that? How did they respond? How did that impact the company in terms of the service and demand, and then obviously the impact on what the teams were working on?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely were lucky in that our client base is quite diversified. And we didn't really know what was going to happen in terms of clients. And I think that 2 clients that were quite significant clients paused their work. Another one asked for a discount. So our options financially were changing really rapidly. And in terms of and that really placed a kind of high premium on the importance of internal comms, because you saw in trade press and stuff, some people saying, we predict that we will be only 5% down or only 10% down, or some people saying, oh, we'll not make any redundancies. We didn't ever feel that we could be confident in terms of predicting what was coming. But I think we did feel that as long as we continued to behave in a way that felt true to us, and that for us is about being really transparent and really open and really inclusive with the team, that we would come through it. So in 4 months, we lost about 20 odd K's worth of retained income. And also, I think at the same time, we found that our clients needed oddly more support because many of them were completely re-engineering their plans for the year. Options wise, we looked at going down to 4 days a week for those above 35,000 because we did need to make some cost savings. And then actually what happened is that a bigger client gave us notice. So actually we shifted from 4 days a week for everyone to putting 2 particular people on furlough. One just got poached by a rival agency whilst on furlough, and the other is now, I'm really pleased to say, back with us 3 days a week. So we've kind of weathered, I think, the initial storm, and different clients were affected differently. And that obviously meant that what Charlie and I could do in terms of giving the team confidence and an accurate prediction was really limited. But what we could do is say, this is always how we will approach this, that we're all in it together and that we'll be really transparent with you as soon as we know what our options are going to be.
What was the impact on you? I mean, Charlie is the other co-founder in the company, but what was for you personally, the £20 of loss of retained income, having to deal with the volatility of that situation, having a member of staff poached when they were on furlough. How did you personally get through it and handle it? And also, what were the priorities that you were thinking about when you were managing it for your team as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of the advantages of being a partnership and having a business partner, because it means you're not completely alone with those challenges. But one of the things that it did highlight for me was the importance of our partnership network and also our relationships, my personal relationships with our clients, because I think there were a lot of clients who were in similar positions where they were going through challenging times, having to make difficult decisions. And actually that's prompted a kind of almost deeper conversations with clients about their day-to-day business decisions, which was nice for me to be able to share, but has deepened our relationship with them as advisors. And having Charlie to go through our options with has helped. We've also really leaned hard on our accountants. And I think the other things that surprised me was that we have always had an informal network of partner agencies, people who do similar things but slightly differently, or do different things to a much deeper degree. And actually, we deepened our relationships with them. So we've done a lot more kind of informal chats, but also actually we've done some partnership work. So we've done, a content series with our friends at Pepper Studio and Shape History about coronavirus heroes and kind of quarantine life recommendations, which was a social media partnership. We've had lunch and learns with Kate and Anushka at Houston, and we've even had referrals from other agency partners at the Romans and at Flint, which has been really nice. So actually, I think my relationship with what you could potentially consider my competitors has actually become closer, and I've really appreciated their support and that growing sense of community that we have with them, and that camaraderie that they find themselves facing similar challenges. And it's really nice to be able to talk to people who are in that position.
That's fascinating that, you brought up this actually during the lockdown period, and I assume even now, you've actually come together with other agencies that might traditionally be that, competitors, and actually you guys have formed a support network really for each other as organizations and helping each other out. I think that's a really interesting thing that's come out of lockdown, and that's been of real use to you.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, communications is a relationship business. And I think that the quality of those relationships, whether they're with clients or with other agencies, has always been important to me. And I think because Atlas is a small team, we have always had a network of partners who we sometimes jointly pitched with. We sometimes, we were white labeling our work for them. We were the sort of, we were the political geek to their consumer news junkie. We were the corporate to their jazzy consumer team, or that we were the comms people to their social media expertise. And I think that our understanding of what good partnership looks like has developed definitely in these more difficult times, because we've had some really real conversations. But we've always found that it's about sticking to your knitting, knowing what you're good at, being really open and transparent about how you work, and finding people with whom actually we have loads in common in terms of culture and values and how we like to work, and that actually you don't need to be working for the same branded organization to have that same sense of how you approach work and how you approach kind of creativity and new ideas and client relationships.
Sure. I mean, what were your key things that you did for your team? I love the way, by the way, sticking to your knitting. I've never heard that before, but that's a brilliant phrase. Yeah, I'm going to use that from now on, definitely.
I'm a big fan of really, really tired metaphors, so they'll be there for sure.
But what were the key things that you did for your team? The ones that you didn't put on furlough, just to help them get through it. Were there any initiatives you put forward, or any little practices that developed to help everyone through that particularly difficult few months?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so the starting with the survey was really useful because it identified those kind of common pinch points, challenges, and also the potential opportunities, and it meant we could kind of then collectively focus on those. I think the team noticed that the clients' needs were changing, that they were playing a growing role in helping their clients to cope and stay motivated. And for me, it was really important that was actually a really good opportunity to remind the team that we don't just provide a press office or a political engagement program. Actually, we are a sounding board to our clients, and that those relationships are really important, and that ability to be a sort of fresh perspective and a place to discuss how you change and how you adapt to these circumstances was a service that they were offering. I don't think many of them had necessarily thought about the service in that way. The day-to-day relationships, we were missing face-to-face contact, the informal catch-ups. We've done a lot of moving to voice notes so that you can actually hear a person. So we try to send less emails in terms of our internal traffic and send more voice notes, because actually the tone of voice and the difference between I need this now and I need this now is not like in the words are the same, but the tone is really important. And actually, not that we don't talk to each other like that. Being able to sort of pick up your phone and say, I've had this question from a client, I'm not quite sure about this, I'm thinking about this and this, what do you think? Is the kind of thing you would turn to each other and do in the office. It doesn't feel worthy of sending an email, or an email just adds to the extra traffic in your inbox and you've got more and more emails coming through therefore. But actually it's quite nice to hear your colleague and be like, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm just off out for a walk in a minute, and so that we've done a lot more of that. We've also done, I think we really noticed the importance of routine in terms of setting quite clear boundaries, and that for many people, they had observed for the first time how important their commute was in terms of that routine. Actually, like getting out of the house was an important start to the day. So we needed to be really clear about when we were available and starting the day right, and when we were switching off. So we've encouraged people to put blocks of time in their diary where they're out for a lunchtime walk or doing the shopping. And we have always been really flexible, because as far as I'm concerned, if you work 8 till 4 or 9 till 5 or 10 till 6, as long as the work is being done and across the team there are enough people around to cover the core hours, I don't mind when people are in the office. I think that creates a challenge for management, which existed before lockdown, but has been accelerated by that, where how do you support people and how do you measure whether they're doing a good job when you can't literally see them at their desk?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the voice notes is a really, really good idea that I haven't heard before, but it makes total sense. The type of things you'd turn to your colleague and want to just have a chat about. It is a very different context to something that you want to send in an email and clog up in an inbox about. And just having that practice, I think, is a really, really good and innovative little piece of routine.
Well,
and that makes a big difference.
Funnily enough, so it actually came from the youngest member of our team. And when I talked about the survey, what we did after that was that we actually ran, and apologies, this sounds slightly pretentious, but we ran an innovation sprint. So having looked at those 4 areas that were difficult in terms of client relationships, being there for each other, adapting our marketing, and also being more efficient day to day, we broke down into separate teams, and then we spent 6 weeks like brainstorming ideas and coming up with little things and also bigger ideas to look at all of those. And then the small teams presented back to everybody else, and some of those ideas are baked into the day to day now, like the voice notes, and some of those are other bigger, longer term projects and ideas. But I think it really helped me to feel like we weren't wasting the crisis. And that the team having some sense of like coming together. And yeah, as I said, that idea for voice notes came from the youngest member of our team, because she uses WhatsApp like that with her friends anyway. And actually we've now mass adopted it because it definitely feels like it worked.
Yeah, definitely. That's fascinating stuff. We're just going to take a quick break, but coming up we'll be chatting to Vanessa about tackling the transition from lockdown and how these long-term changes might be impacting the PR and communications industry going forwards. Don't forget that this is a podcast series, so if you like what you're hearing, you can subscribe on your preferred podcast library, or indeed, if you like video podcasts, we are on YouTube if you just search PR in Lockdown. We'll be back in just one moment. And Vanessa, let's talk about the now. We're in this transition from a lockdown into this new reality, as everyone keeps on talking about. How is Atlas Partners doing? What are you? Where are you at? And how is particularly the demand and the services for clients? How's that coming through?
I think the sun is now coming out, and that is potentially metaphorical. Like, we had 2 big pitch requests come in the last couple of weeks. We did have some good opportunities come in through lockdown. I did not expect that we would be able to win pitches and build client relationships entirely online, but there are a few people now who we've been working with for about 3 months, one of whom I met for the first time in person for a coffee the other day, which was very strange. So people often say that public affairs particularly and the corporate stuff is a bit counter-cyclical. We definitely had some clients who experienced difficulties and put work on pause. We've had other new projects come in. So we have kind of, I feel like, weathered the initial phase of the storm. But, we also are going to see the consequences of clients having to cut back on budgets across the year. So I don't think we're out of the woods yet. But it definitely feels more kind of positive at the moment, and that's really nice. So yeah, it's without wanting to kind of get my crystal ball out and do my Mystic Meg impersonation. I feel like we've weathered the toughest parts, and actually we've really. One of the nice things of like talking to the team about it so openly was that I think they have really appreciated how we have handled this, and it's actually brought the team closer together. So even though we are far apart, we feel like we've lived through this difficult time together, and we're kind of more bonded as a result.
Yeah. How have you found pitching virtually? You know, the idea of trying to win big briefs whilst also not really actually having met the person physically maybe before, and also trying to get that kind of level of engagement and selling and really communicating the idea across virtual means.
I have been surprised, to be honest, that we've been successful at that because pitching feels so like it's about establishing rapport, and establishing rapport is about so much more than just seeing someone's face and hearing their voice. It's actually also about the non-verbal cues, the body language, most of which you miss when you're just looking at somebody's kind of looking at their back wall and looking at their art on the walls and stuff like that. We definitely tried in the pitch processes that we were going through to have more engagement with the people before the pitch itself, and we made an effort, I think, to cut down the content and increase the time for conversation. So, I mean, typically you get an hour for your pitch, and maybe previously we were doing half-hour presentation, half an hour discussion. Actually, what we did was fewer slides that were meant to prompt conversation, and so that we ended up having maybe 10 slides and actually then just discussing throughout the different questions. And that actually felt in some ways a much more constructive way to pitch, that we had to engage them, and the people that we were talking to were really engaged, which was nice. I'm sure that many of your listeners will have that experience of like pitching to people who remain completely silent throughout, and then you're just like, you come out and you think, well, how did that go? And you have no idea, because it's just a complete blank wall, and that's really tough. So
you've talked about the transparency being a key thing for the team. Everyone's still working remotely, I assume. Everyone's still working virtually. Have you given any thought yet to the idea of going back to the office or having some kind of presence physically back in London at all?
Definitely. I mean, we have... we'd always encourage people to work from home, and Charlie and I, we like to style ourselves as creative, professional contrarians. So often we do debate things, and sometimes we debate things internally, so the team are aware that we have different positions on these things. Charlie has always been the working from home skeptic, principally because I think he thought that if he was at home, he'd probably be skiving, and therefore he assumed that everybody else would be skiving. The turn up for the books was that when we were all working from home, we were feeling more productive, and I think that has definitely changed his attitude to flexible working and working from home more generally. We asked the team, one of the questions in our survey was about whether you wanted to go back to working completely in the office as normal, whether you would work from home more often but not terribly regularly, or whether you wanted to go to become a working from home regularly person. And there's definitely different perspectives on that. Roughly a third in each camp, although fewer in the I definitely want to go back to normal camp. And then that's coincided with the conversation with our landlords, who slightly hilariously think that now is a good time to double the rent.
Oh my goodness.
So we have always been really pro flexibility, and now we're really looking at the options. So we're considering quitting the office entirely, because
and going fully virtual.
Yeah, so it was seeing those personal and professional upsides from working from home. I think we wouldn't go totally remote, because I think what we want to do is get some, a few occasions, a few of us have been in the office, because what we said basically was, look, the office is open. There are 16 desks there. If you want to go, as many as 4 of you at a time can be there. Go if you feel that you are comfortable doing that, but try to avoid taking public transport. And obviously, as the guidance has changed, we've kind of adapted to that. A few people have been in, but mostly that's people who can get there from walking or cycling. And so it's been nice to kind of go in, and this week I ran a strategy session where there were 3 of us in the office, and that was actually really good, because strategy sessions particularly, and messaging sessions, are the kind of thing where you do need to be able to kind of give each other those non-verbal cues.
Yeah. Did it feel weird to have three people in a room together, three colleagues actually, which you are there in front of you as opposed to on a screen?
I mean, to me, it was really nice because, one of the massive advantages of running your own business is that you can hire people that you enjoy working with. The reason why our mission is to be the happiest agency is because Charlie and I want to be happy at work. I need to be careful that I'm not implying that we therefore are looking for cultural fit and we're saying everyone has to be like us, because I'm, as a diversity advocate, really conscious that that's not a good thing necessarily, and that you end up with all sorts of unconscious bias and a feeling of alienation. But actually, I like my colleagues, and it was really nice to see them, and that was lovely to be together. So what we're contemplating is renting a really big space through somebody like Breather, who we've used a lot for temporary meeting rooms already, and 1 day a week. And so we can all be together 1 day a week, and then potentially having individual memberships for local workspaces so that the teams can, so they're not staying at their kitchen table, and so that they have a shorter commute, so that they are able to go out to work locally, have a short commute, but then we are together at least once a week where we can have those, catch-ups and those more creative sessions where you actually need to be able to sort of tic-tac off each other.
I think that's really interesting because there's been a lot of discussion in this area, and it's been, I think, there's been talk of a hybrid model, but a lot of people they still haven't really engaged with actually creatively coming up with different kind of solution. I think what you've proposed there is actually a very creative way of utilizing the types of different offices you can get and the different services you can get within offices, and actually really blending it across those kind of services to create something which is...
To be honest, I'm quite excited about it. I've definitely found personally that I've really enjoyed working from home, which, considering I'm a massive extrovert, I'm quite surprised by. But actually, I think I find the office environment really quite distracting because I tend to get into everyone else's conversations and get really stuck in. And also I'm very accessible, which means people ask me a lot of questions, which means time for really thinking and getting into flow when I'm writing are things that I have that I've found much easier working from home. And I'm sort of excited about the idea that I live in South London, as do quite a few of the team. We could have the meeting room 1 week in South London, the next week we can have it in West London where Charlie's based, and next week in North London. And actually that gives us a bit of diversity that we haven't really had before, and it means that as long as we can find decent spaces that we can use on a regular basis so that it feels kind of administratively efficient, like that's actually quite fun, I think, to be able to change it up. And variety is one of the things that we know drives happiness for the team and for us. So why wouldn't we embrace that?
Just very quickly, let's look at I'm going to ask you to be Mystic Meg. I know you mentioned about being Mystic Meg earlier on, but I'm going to ask this of you. What do you think when you look into the future, when you look into beyond the next 6 months, let's talk about the next 2-3 years. Is there anything you really see as a clear impact that, that the PR industry is going to go and communications industry is going to go through as a result of this lockdown period, as a result of COVID? Is there anything that is really clear to you there's going to be a change?
I mean, I think there are a couple of things, many of which probably are just that the pandemic has been a catalyst to accelerate changes that already were required. And I really think that it's important not to waste a crisis. So, we know that the pandemic puts pressure on client budgets. That puts pressure on demonstrating a return on investment in public affairs and public relations. And also it puts pressure on how you build and protect and nurture a really great team. I also think that it has highlighted some things that the industry, really needs to take more seriously. And I think it's really important that, many of us were spending more time online at home at the same time that the Black Lives Matter kind of protests were really taking off. I mean, those are not new protests. That's not a new message, nor is structural racism by any means a new problem. But I think it got a more serious engagement, and frankly, a lot of white people were thinking about it, possibly seriously for the first time, which is bad, but also, let's harness that. our representation as an industry is woeful. I think the CIPR and PRCA's diversity stats both show that we got less representative of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic groups over the last 3 years. So I feel like the crisis has accelerated the need to have serious conversations about diversity, about flexibility, and about generating a return on investment in creativity, all of which were there before, but feel more acute now. And I think, I've felt it's been a really good time to reflect and acknowledge on the level of white privilege that's baked into most agencies, including mine, and there were some really powerful and quite depressing stories coming out from people like Joe at City of London and Bemi from Wimbar, and Elizabeth Bananuka from BME PR Pros brought out the new blueprint standard, which I think is really exciting. And we've seen people like Manifest and Infusion who are leading the way in terms of kite mark and ally status for that. And I think that is something that is going to be and should be a more pressing conversation in the next couple of months and years. So that's not necessarily COVID related, but I think it has been accelerated and given more focus by the crisis, and that is a good thing that we should totally embrace.
Vanessa, if people want to get in touch with you, both personally, but also the company more widely, what is the best way to do so?
Well, we are at Atlas_comms on Twitter. We're also on Instagram, same handle. And then you can just email hello@atlas-partners.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thanks so much again, Vanessa, for coming on the podcast. Really interesting to hear about what you guys are up to and how you've dealt with the past few months and what you've got ahead as well. And thanks so much for listening. Don't forget, this is an ongoing series, so subscribe to us on your preferred podcast library, or you can see Vanessa and I's smiling faces back at you in a video podcast on YouTube if you just search PR in Lockdown. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you again soon. PR in Lockdown is presented by Rob Double, and the guest this episode was Vanessa Pine, co-founder and director of Atlas Partners. It is created by Access Studios in collaboration with the PRCA.